Welcome back to another episode of the Jesus Cartel, where I think that I pushed all the buttons I'm supposed to push, but I can't be certain.
So here's the thing. We can be certain that I pushed all the buttons I was supposed to push because I'm in charge of nothing.
Yeah, I was about to say.
So we know that that's correct.
There is a button you push sometimes for me, and you
But I
didn't push
didn't
it
do it
today.
today, so I'm good.
Yeah. Well, what's been going on with you?
You know, we've had a busy few days, but nothing bad. Just a lot of my stuff is usually pretty well planned out and stuff, but there's been a lot of things happening this week that wasn't really planned out, that things are just kind of happening. It's nothing bad. It's all good, or whatever. But just been a little busier than my schedule looked like, I guess I should say. Last week I had a really busy schedule, and it took a little while to overcome that. But this week, schedule wasn't as busy, but yet we've been busy. For instance, yesterday I hit my 10,000 steps by 2 o'clock yesterday.
Yeah, it's pretty early in the day.
And that means something for me. That means I was on the phone a lot. That means that we had things going on, taking care of business and stuff. So, and that wasn't planned and stuff. So, anyhow, had a lot going on. But we are, you may be aware of this, you may not, but we are hosting our very first youth summer camp ever for Thrive Church. And the children leave today. And so when we get through filming this, today's Thursday, I'm going to go and pray for them and see them off and stuff. And then they're going to camp for Thursday, Friday, and part of Saturday leading into that. And I heard they have really good speakers, really good praise and worship leaders. And Devin has now spent $2,000.
Wow.
He says he's not through. But he has spent $2,000. The first ticket was like $650. Second ticket was $1,000, and then he had some more last night on food alone for 40 people for 6 meals. So, and we made like cheesy chicken spaghetti and all that that's already made. So I don't know what they're going to do, but if your kid comes back and had to go to the dentist because of all the Skittles and Jolly Ranchers and all that he bought, it was tough. And then, some people know how to do stuff. Some people don't. Ryan decides last night that he wants to do s'mores while they're there. Probably doesn't have any wood or anything like that, but he wants to do s'mores. So he calls Devin and says, hey, we need the stuff for s'mores, including the little sticks that you put your marshmallow on, right? Now remember, we're not having hot dogs or anything like that, but some of the kids will want a s'more. Joseph's not coming.
Nothing says s'more like 90-degree heat at
camp.
At 8 p.m. while it's still daylight.
With all the mosquitoes and everybody telling you that bugs are a major thing.
Yeah.
And so he tells Devin. So Devin goes and gets the skewers, or whatever for everybody.
Yeah.
Well, guess how many Ryan told him to get? 40. So there's 4 in a pack, and he gets 10 packs. Each pack is $6 a piece.
So can we, before you keep going, because this is tremendous for the record. I'm having the time of my life listening to this story.
Right.
I'm trying to picture the mathematical size of the fire that Ryan was going to
That's all that's going through my mind.
Yeah.
How big of a fire do you have to have for 40 people to all roast their marshmallow at the same time? And how close can you actually get to a fire where you can host 40 people at a time?
An experienced youth pastor would have bought 8.
Yes.
And then kicked themselves that they didn't only buy 4.
Yes, for sure. and bought them last all season on clearance.
How long does it take to roast a marshmallow as a follow-up?
It's kind of like when we would spend all this money on a church-wide Easter egg hunt
Yeah.
and spend a fortune, and they would find all the eggs in 30 seconds.
So
and,
annoying.
And all the money, and
Yeah.
it's kind of the same way. It's like you set aside an hour
Yeah.
for a marshmallow roast, and it takes literally 20 seconds because you got a fire big enough for 40 people to stand around with their own skewer.
And then you have parents like us who throw all that candy away as soon as we get home.
Right.
And so it's like we let them run around and we'll give them like 3 pieces of candy, but we easily toss $60 to $80 worth of candy every time we do an event like that.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. And then the other side of it is inexperienced leaders think that it's going to take the whole hour, so they don't plan anything else. And then the rest of the time, you have 2 options. You can either try to come up with something else or let them spend the rest of the time eating their candy,
Yeah.
which their parents are going to be very appreciative
Very frustrated,
of.
yeah.
Right. And so anyhow, you
That's
spent
wild.
$60
Yeah.
on skewers last night.
There is a podcast, and I don't know the name of it. I've only listened to clips of it, but it is specifically directed towards youth ministry and youth pastors. And all it is it's people like calling in the stupidest thing that they did and then everybody just laughs about it and talks about it. Because when you're learning youth ministry, one, it's a very unique dynamic, the age group that you're dealing with. Two, usually that's like I want to call it kind of an entry level ministry position. So a lot of times, like if it's your first, like that's where you start is with the youth, not with the younger kids.
No, because everybody's scared.
You need somebody, and you need somebody much more trustworthy there.
Right.
But like with that 13 to 18, you're kind of like, what's worse that could happen, And so that tends to be where people get their feet wet in ministry, and then I think this is the first ever event Ryan has planned on his own.
It is.
And so it's like he'll look back on this.
Oh yeah, it's great
and it's
experience.
gonna be-
Well, and that's what's so cool about them going close, but not too close. That it feels like their own event. But if Daddy had to get over there real quick, you could.
Yeah.
And so, but not only was this his very first event, but everybody that he's taken, it's their very first event.
Yeah.
Besides Elena, who hasn't been able to participate.
Elena's coming?
She's coming.
Oh, awesome.
And but she hasn't been able to participate in a lot of it from not being so close.
Yeah.
And so she drove in last night at midnight to Shreveport, and so she's been a part of a little bit of planning, but not as much. And she's the only one that's got experience. So they're carrying 10 leaders that all had different roles that have all done them this week. Because even though they've known about it, they're just inexperienced. They don't know how to plan ahead. They all got great hearts. They're all going to do wonderful, and the end result's going to be great. But we're going to spend more money and waste more time and have more, just because it's new.
I do want to tell you that the meal should have cost around $900.
Yeah.
For what amount of people?
So I feed this group every Wednesday night.
Yeah.
And so I know exactly how much it costs to feed them and to feed them something that they would want. And then, if you're looking at usually about 70 to, I usually spend 50 to 70, but I'm usually using some stuff from the house too. So having to do it somewhere else does take a little bit more. So I'd say $75 to $80 a meal. And then about $200 worth of snacks, and then some items that you normally don't have, like some different drinks and different things like that. So I would have said the same thing, $1,000 or less, 800 to 1,000 would have been a big play. The other side of it is, I did talk to Devin the other day when we were walking and said, look, one of the biggest complaints I ever hear about camp is the food. So let's don't have that happen. We're not poor. Church is doing great, youth fund's great, local outreach is great. Let's make sure that we don't have that problem. But the other side of it is this: the kids that we have are very resourceful. A lot of these kids we just took to Sulphur and stuff, for baseball, and we fed them this great pizza buffet, and as soon as they get to the hotel, they're door dashing. We can't door dash at this camp, so that means they're going to bring it. Right. I know Brian Enlow told me that Ava and Austin, went and spent $50 on her and Austin's snacks for these 2 days.
100%.
You see what I'm saying? And I think most that's probably going to be very common.
Yeah.
So we probably didn't need $1,000 worth of snacks.
Yeah.
Because we're probably going to have $1,000 worth of snacks that the kids bring themselves.
100%.
But anyhow, it's good. It's all good fun. Yesterday, there was some weird looks when time after time, other leaders that are going asked me when I was going to get there. And I told them I wasn't coming. And I think that they just have a comfort zone with me being around. And when they found out I wasn't, all of a sudden they started kind of running and doing stuff. So
yeah,
talk about that a little bit as far as leadership and realizing that, hey, you're the man type deal.
Sure. And the other deal is Ryan hasn't been doing this very long. That's not a knock at Ryan.
No, he doesn't.
It's a understanding of like, have the parents really identified Ryan as a leader of this situation, even though he has been leading the situation. One of the difficulties in church ministry is that everybody looks through the pastor into everything else, and that's not a bad thing, you know, because ultimately that is where the buck stops in every situation. However, when you are entrusting leaders, and also Thrive Church has not been a church for very long.
Right.
This is a brand new.
Right.
It's a brand new situation. So no matter who you had, if it wasn't really me,
right.
I'm the only person I could think of that you wouldn't have this issue, and that is just because I was the youth pastor at River for so many years, so that they already would have been very, very familiar. You could have hired anybody that had years and years of experience. If they didn't know them intimately already, you were still going to run into this issue. And so I would...
so I haven't run into it with the parents yet because they don't know.
Yeah.
I run into it with
So
the
it's the
youth
students.
leaders.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the youth
Oh,
leaders,
wow, yeah.
the ones that are responsible for this
I
stuff,
got you.
didn't realize quite how responsible they are.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, so I'm just saying that they're in charge of something, but they also thought that I was going to be there.
Yeah, yeah.
So now they're realizing that, hey, not only am I in charge of this,
Yeah.
but I actually have to do
Yeah,
it.
help's not coming.
Right.
Yeah, nobody's going to bail you out of this.
That's right.
Yeah, it's Ryan's primary job, and this episode isn't dedicated to trying to correct Ryan, by the way.
No.
I'm sure Ryan's doing an excellent job.
We're walking
So-
through leadership.
Yeah, right. But as a youth minister, so that's his position. His primary job is to pour into the leaders. It's actually not to pour into the students. He should pour into the students. I know he is pouring into the students, but his primary job is to equip the leaders to pour into the students. And so when you're doing it extremely well, the kids might actually not exactly know who the youth pastor is, because the leaders are taking so much liberty, doing such a good job, are so influential, and are really stepping up to such a degree that on Wednesdays it may look like Ryan doesn't do anything.
Right.
That if he gets to that place and it's running well, both of them have to be true. But if you get to that place where it looks like Ryan doesn't do anything and the group is just absolutely killing it, that's how you know he's operating the balance of that role perfectly.
Yep.
Because you can't be a one-man show. You, especially if you're going to have a large group, a successful group that's poured into and has any sort of depth, is you got to be able to teach these leaders to get that depth. You know, Jesus had 12 disciples, and of the 12, he had 3, which were in a whole nother tier of relationship than the other 9 were. It was very obvious if you read Scripture. And so, if Jesus is really heavily pouring into 3, not even 12, 3, then our expectation should be about the same for our leaders. 3 to 12 is kind of where you want to be. And the closer you can get to 3, the better. And so more leaders is a good thing. I think the best ratio we ever had at one point is we had 60 students and 30 leaders. And so it was 2. You had 2 kids that you were responsible for pouring into, developing deep relationships with, and it was awesome. And so, but my job wasn't, I didn't have 2 students.
You had the leaders.
I had the leaders.
Yeah.
My job was supporting those leaders. I hammered the males, and my wife tended to the females. And obviously I was had knowledge of both, as long as there was no personal things that weren't supposed to be shared with me. But I had knowledge of everything that was going on. But it would have been irresponsible for me to try to disciple 60 students. It would have never happened.
Well, Fresh Start set up the same exact way.
100%.
You know, I mean, the church is set up that way. You know, Fresh Start set up that way. I mean, that's the way we know how to do business.
Yep.
You know, we look at servant leadership. We look at the model that Jesus gave us. That's the way the youth group set up. That's the way the church is set up. That's the way Fresh Start set up, and it has to be that way.
Yep.
If you get out of it to where, you know, I don't think this has ever happened. And this is one of the coolest things to me. But out of 6,000 people that we've had to come to Fresh Start, or ever how many it is, I've never heard anybody say, man, he's in Clay's program. Or he's going to Clay's place.
That's a good point.
You
I've
know,
never heard that either.
Never heard that. That is by design.
Yeah.
You know, you never heard anybody say he's going to Clay's place. That's not what we're trying to accomplish. That's the opposite of what we're trying to accomplish. We don't want to hear somebody say that we're going. You don't hear people say they're going to Clay's church. You hear people going to say the brand has to be bigger than the man. It has to be. You know, we heard. You know, one of the Miles Monroe say, "Hey, look, if I passed away tomorrow and my ministry passed away with me, then I would feel like a failure." You know, because it's so much bigger than any one man. And so we're not, you know, you're not going to have that. And it's the same way. And that's the way you're talking about with the youth ministry. It's set up to where you could walk in there for several Wednesdays and never know who the leader is.
So we went to church camp one year, and it was when we were at 60 and 30.
Okay.
We went to church camp that year, and the church camp started calling all of the youth pastors of the churches onto the stage by name. You know, hey, such and such church, this person, come up here. And when they got to our church, as we were at the river at the time, they said, Andrew Skull, River of Life, come on up here. And when I started walking, one of the kids who's been in our church for 2 or 3 years looks at their leader and goes, he's the youth pastor?
I love it.
It was hysterical. He had no idea. Because
that's what we want.
I didn't teach.
Right.
On Wednesday nights, I had 30 leaders to rotate to teach, and I wanted them. I helped teach them how to teach, but I never taught.
And you were working with them outside of that on Sunday nights and different things.
And so we would have special events like y'all are having with your camp, and you know who the speaker was for the special events? Me.
Yeah, they wasn't used
because
to
they
it.
never heard, they never hear me speak. Yeah. And so I would come in sometime, and we would have other people sometimes too, but I could speak at our own events, and it'd be a treat to the students because it's not somebody they ever hear speak. And it was a neat setup, man, and that's the way that I wanted it. And I've never felt like I hid myself in the correct place more so than I did at that time period. You know, it was like, hey, because the youth group was booming, the leaders were booming. Like, the relationships were great. We all loved spending time together. It was not labor for us to work hard. Right. It was such a cool place, man. And Ryan was actually a big part of that. And so
he's seen that, and he's mimicked a lot of that, and he's done really well. It's just when you plan your first event, and it's somewhere you've never been to for a camp or anything like that, it's just a lot of moving parts.
Dude, event planning sucks.
Right?
Just to say it out loud, it
sucks.
Well,
to me, I love it. It's my favorite part.
I think that Ryan, you know, there are some ways. Obviously, we're always all growing. You know, there are some ways where we'll see him continue to grow, but there's a lot of ways that in his first ever youth gig that he's doing a lot better than I was doing.
Well,
and so, you know,
I agree, but now Ryan also has a maturity level because he's not young.
Sure.
This isn't the first time he's been in leadership. He, he operated under you in leadership there. He also operated under leadership of Brother Dave at the soccer, and then was the head coach and stuff. So Ryan's done a good job of being the second or third man and being the first man and different stuff. So he's done really well on that. But when you plan an event to where you're going, all the moving parts, it's not a home event. An away event is different. When I used to do catering and stuff, the best catering I didn't let myself really expand a lot in the catering on purpose because I wanted the very best product. But when my neighbors across the street said, hey, we're having our son's wedding and it's literally across the field from my house. I was like, we can do anything.
Yeah.
Because I'm at home. I feel good. I'm confident. I basically take meat off and carry it to your house, you know. But when you go away and you have kids stay away and all that, it's a lot more complicated.
I can tell you when it comes to event planning that this is kind of my mode of operation. First off, if I can find somebody who is a solid event planner, I'm going to get you on my team as fast as I can. Yeah. I value you more than I value anyone else, because that is definitely let me be clear. I'm good at event planning, but the stress management that comes with event planning wears on me more than any other form of stress in my life. I can deal with my whole life. My rent house flooded the other day. Fine. That didn't bother me a bit. It's like, well, this happens sometimes in life. I started cleaning, started working, made a couple phone calls. It's going to be what it's going to be, and we're okay. You know, everybody's like, oh my God, you know. And I was like, take a breath. We're good here. You know, like stuff like that doesn't bother me. The world could be burning down around me. I'm okay. But when I'm planning an event, I will literally hold my breath the whole time. You want me to help plan your event. You just don't want me to be ultimately in charge of the event.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm great at troubleshooting. And so like if you have just a dynamite event planner, bring me in the meeting and let me call out the things that could potentially go wrong that we need to make sure we have backup plans for. And I'll help you get them all set up. But just don't make me be the person who's ultimately standing there over the top of it as the guy. I hate that level of stress for whatever reason, more so than anything else. It wears on me. And we had an event some years ago. It was a big D now. We had like 5-6 different churches involved, hundreds of students. And one of the games, we were using some pudding for one of the games, but I didn't get instant pudding. I accidentally got regular pudding. And I burnt the pudding because I was so scatterbrained doing all sorts of different things. And I remember my wife like coming up to me and being like, are you okay? I've never seen you make a mistake like that. You know what I mean? Like, because I don't get scattered.
Right.
But when I'm over an event, I get scattered. And so I really need someone better than me to take the lead on that and let me play number 2 in that situation. And I'm a great number 2, but I do not do well.
I think that was kind of the issue with some of this is I think that some of the people involved in this, and like I said, this isn't going to be an issue. Everything's going to be fine. But I think some of the people involved just assumed that I would take that role, even though I let them know at the very beginning I wasn't.
Sure.
And I've done a good job of not taking on that role.
And it's important that you don't.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And a lot of people don't realize that, like, we talked about it in my class the other day, the importance of pruning. And you don't, everybody talks about, I got to hear from a guy who was like, this sounds so stupid, but he's a professional pruner. He tends vineyards. And I got to hear him talk about pruning a vineyard in a way that I've never heard anybody else talk about it. He says, everybody always talks about pruning branches that aren't bearing fruit. He said, anytime you hear about pruning, that's what they're talking about. He said, but someone who tends a vineyard very well will also prune an overproducing branch.
Yes.
Because an overproducing will cast shade on the others and not allow them to produce what they could produce. And so even though you're taking a branch that's overproducing and you're pruning it back, and people will be like, well, that was stupid. He said, once all of them produce what they're supposed to produce, it will create a greater number than the overproducing branch could produce by itself.
And I think that's what Jesus was really trying to teach us in the first 4 verses of John chapter 15. Everybody skips to John 5. But John 15:5.
Yeah.
But in the first one, he's talking about that God prunes him.
Right.
You know, and we know he's not pruning bad fruit. We know he's not pruning sin. But we also know that Jesus is like wanting to step back so that others can do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah. And so if you overhaul the situation, Ryan doesn't get any better. If Ryan overhauls the other leaders, they don't get any better. You know what I mean? So everybody has the opportunity for growth here, and that's a good thing. But you're having to prune yourself back so that it can happen.
Right.
And
then you get to decide, hey, things that that were mistakes, how much ownership do you make them take? Do you wait till afterwards and say, okay, now I want you to pay me back for all the different sticks that you bought that you didn't have to spend,
Right.
Or do you, make sure that, hey, they recognize that? Or, when we have the banquet every year, we look at it on Monday morning after the banquet, and we write down things that need to be better for the next one.
Yeah.
Because a year later, we're not going to remember.
Right.
So we write down, hey, did we buy too much lettuce? Did we do this? Did we do whatever? Now, one thing that I'm very excited about at this event is, for the first time ever that I know of, we actually have 2 full RNs going on this trip.
Oh, nice.
And so that's really cool.
Yeah.
Because, like you were talking about, parents may not know all the leaders real well. We're a new church and stuff. So to be able to tell them that we have 2 full RNs, one that works at the hospital that's used to all kind of different things, and then one of them that has a little bit more of a behavioral health type background too, to help, because some of these kids aren't used to being away from home. We got some young ones going and stuff. Some of them aren't used to adapting in the country and everything. And so to be able to have 2 really solid RNs with 2 different backgrounds going, I think is really cool element too.
Yeah, that's huge.
Sure.
I also want to say it can be very difficult for some people, to allow themselves to be pruned back. We don't talk about that a lot because it's a control thing. But when we say control thing, a lot of people, when you hear control thing, it sounds like an ego thing.
Overbearing.
And it's not always that. A lot of times it's just fear. It's not really control or power or anything like that you're jogging for. It's just you don't want something to fail, and you trust yourself. Naturally, you trust yourself more than you trust anyone else because you know how much something matters to you. It's like, hey, everything that I'm involved in matters to me. And it may matter to me more than it matters to Devin. It may matter to me more than it matters to Danny. And so shouldn't I be the one to do these things because I know how much I care about them, and I can't gauge their heart perfectly on how much it really matters to them? Yeah. And so that's a lot of times where people burden themselves with things and refuse to move out the way. But the deal is if you'll get out of the way, man, you'd be surprised how much growth people can have underneath you and how much better it will be once you move out of the way. And
well, just like for me, this last year and stuff, I haven't been playing music. And so sometimes, most of the time, there is an empty spot on the stage that I could feel.
Yep.
And so you're like, okay, so there's a keyboard. He knows how to play keyboard. Why isn't he playing keyboard? Or there's, guitar, there's a spot. And it's because even though there's nobody in that position, it highlights the other people because there is nobody in the position.
Right.
So the guitars are able to be heard better because there isn't a keyboard there. And it puts more responsibility on them that, hey, they're in the limelight a little bit more. So they've been better guitar players because there wasn't a keyboard player.
Yep.
So it's like, yeah, but doesn't it sound like you're missing the keyboard? Yeah, it does. And but now it sounds less like it because they've gotten better.
Right.
Whereas if they were just in the background all the time, that's the reason why we don't have one vocalist that, hey, this is their songs and this is what they do. Or we don't have one person that starts all the songs or anything. Because why? Because everybody needs to improve. Everybody needs to get better.
I've had a lot of cool compliments that I've genuinely feel very honored to have had in my ministry over the years that people have given me. And one of the coolest compliments that I ever got was somebody called me the Taysom Hill of ministry. Mm-hmm. And what they were saying, if you have no idea who Taysom Hill is, it's like he's a Swiss Army knife. You can put him anywhere. And
football player.
Yeah, you can put him anywhere, and he's going to be able to play that position and do a good job. And that it was a huge compliment, and I appreciated it, and it is true. It was a fair compliment. The problem with that is the ability to wear many hats doesn't necessarily mean that you have the responsibility to wear many hats. And sometimes it's a problem. It can be a problem. Not necessarily for me, though it can be problematic for me if I start trying to do too much at once. But the big problem is, in a lot of situations, I became the easy answer for every problem. It's like, hey, we're having a media issue. Call Andrew. Let Andrew fix it. Hey, we're having a worship issue. Hey, let Andrew fill in. Hey, we don't have anybody to preach this Wednesday. Well, call Andrew. Hey, the youth ministry's falling apart. Get Andrew back in there. Hey, something's going on with the children's ministry. Call Andrew. See if he can do. And the problem is, there were equipped people to do all of those things that were not named Andrew.
Right.
In many cases, better people.
Right.
They just knew they were going to get my yes. And so my availability actually became a hindrance to a lot of people's growth, because in the back of people's mind, they ultimately knew that there was an answer that wasn't them. And so they didn't have to sacrifice. They didn't have to make a commitment to do things, because at the end of the day, they were like, I'm pretty sure Andrew can do that. He'll step in.
One
and he'll
phone
do
call
it.
and we got it.
And so it wasn't until I learned I got to start saying no to some things, not because I don't want to do them and not because I can't do them, but so that the people that God is actually calling into these places will feel some burden of responsibility to actually step into that which God has called them into. And that could be a challenging thing, to allow yourself to, like, hey, I remember the first time I got asked to play keys and I said no. I remember it vividly. And that was why. There were other keyboard players there, and none of them would do it, but they wouldn't do it because they knew that I would. And so finally I said, hey, I'm out. I'm out on the keys for a while. Like, I didn't, and there was like, well, is everything okay? Everything's fine, but I gotta step away.
Well, so here's the very first problem with that. We can talk about that for a minute, because we're talking about leadership and growth and moving and that kind of stuff, which that's what this podcast is about. And, one of the issues I have with that is that the person that's making the call to you to ask you to do that, a lot of times is being lazy.
Right.
Because there's somebody else that God really wants in that position, but they might have to hold their hand a little bit, or they might have to train them a little bit, or dare say they might have to disciple them a little bit.
Right.
So instead of discipling the next person moving up, they're just taking the easy way out and calling Andrew.
Yeah.
Last night when we got to practice, we couldn't, they have Wednesday night band. They couldn't practice Tuesday night like they normally do. Wasn't sure if they're going to have worship. And then all of a sudden, hey, some availability opened up. The lead singer was able to come. So they, hey, let's come to practice. Well, we get to practice, and Drew Wiggers and David Michael are there. And Drew's teaching David Michael how to play bass guitar.
That's awesome.
And so, hey, he's taking the disciple time and he's discipling him.
Yeah.
And so it's like, hey, well, David Michael's here. He can play that. Why doesn't he play bass tonight?
Right.
Just because Cooper's here doesn't mean, and David Michael wasn't quite ready, but if he'd been quite ready, he would have played last night.
Yeah.
Why? Because why not? And so it's like the person that calls Andrew so many times to me when there's other availabilities, but they're being lazy because they're like, well, I just know that one phone call or one text to Andrew and it's done.
Yeah.
And I don't have to worry about it no more. But is that really what we call to do?
Yeah.
Not have to worry about it no more?
Right.
We're disciples that make disciples. And so that bites you in the butt at some point. Yeah. Now, I will say also this is we saw that with Fresh Start come here. Fresh Start's great for the community, but it's made a lot of the community lazy.
Right.
A lot of jobs that, sons used to do for their elderly parents, they don't do anymore. They just call Fresh Start. Right. A lot of the jobs around here that people used to do that kind of made you a little tougher and made you a little man and was a little hotter, now they don't do anymore because Fresh Start guys do those jobs and stuff. And so one call to Danny at Fresh Start and you can get anything done. Yep. From this side to that side. And what it does is it makes some people lazy. And to me, the person that does the calling's lazy, and then the people that didn't, it's just, and maybe that's not the appropriate word, but it's the one that's coming to my mind, because God has called us to work. God has called us to disciple. God has called us to teach people how to do things. Now, are there things that we can do better, quicker, stronger, faster than other people? Yeah, but at the same time, they need to be able to, grow into what God's called them to do also.
100%. And, a lot of times you got to pay attention to, like, if you're having to call somebody for quick fixes constantly, you're probably already fallen into a failure of discipleship.
For sure.
Because that's what causes those is lack of. When I say oversight, I don't mean micromanagement.
Mm-hmm.
Oversight and micromanagement are not the same thing.
That's right.
But people need to have an available window to voice what's going on, voice concerns they're having, voice problems that they're having, without them having to constantly come to you. And so as a leader, as someone who one of the best things you could do as a leader, and this is a big part of the servant leadership model, is to go to the people who serve. I'm going to use finger quotes when I say under you, because you understand what I'm saying. They're not really under you. Right. But you go to the people who are serving under you, and you say, hey, what do you need? What can I do to help you do what you do better? And if you'll do that with some regularity, you won't have these problems, because they're going to feel the most freedom they've ever felt to express what's going on when you ask that question.
Yes.
What can I do? How can I serve you to help you do what you do better than you do? And they're going to tell you whatever's going on when you say that, because there is no better posture as a leader than that humility of, let me serve the people who are under me in this moment. How can I serve you well in this moment? They're going to bring you whatever's going on. And so there's not going to be any burnout. Because you're going to have conversations ahead of time, and if it is truly time for them to move for whatever reason, the Spirit is going to reveal that to you. You'll know before they know. It'd be a great thing. If there's any problems, they're going to bring those to you. If there's solutions you can bring to the table, you're going to have an opportunity to do that before it hit a boiling point that reached frustration. The problem is that just doesn't happen a lot.
Right.
You know, I've been doing youth ministry for 16 years. Yeah. Be 16 years soon, and I can count on one hand how many times people have come to me and asked me if I needed help. You know, like, you just always assumed that I'd have it, or I'd figure it out. Like, it's very, very rare people ask me if I need help. Now, I struggled a lot and had to go through a lot of bad decisions because no one asked me if I needed help, you know? And so, but it doesn't have to be that way, you know, if we take discipleship and mentorship and things like that well. And that's ultimately what a pastor is. It's not just someone who preaches. It's not just someone who has vision for a church. It's somebody who is intentionally involved in making the people that are choosing to be there look more like Jesus. And that doesn't happen through broad scope message. It takes intentionality. And now the argument would be, well, if Jesus did 3 to 12, is it fair to ask the pastor to do hundreds? Right. The answer is no. Right. But is the pastor nailing those 3 to 12? Right. That's the question. That's the question. If the pastor is nailing those 3 to 12, then those 3 to 12 are going to nail 3 to 12, and and you'll see the multiplication happening. When the breakdown happens is when the pastor is not nailing his 3 to 12. Yep. And you can't live on yesterday. There may be a time where they were nailing the 3 to 12, but they're not nailing it now. And I have found myself in that place in ministry where early on, man, I was excited and things were going really well. And then life got busy, some things happened, some things changed. I just found myself getting lazy. Yep. It happens. But we can't stay there. We can't stay there. We got to
recognize it, realize it, and go from there.
And so shake back and move forward. And that's what we hope when we see that situation arise. And hopefully you're surrounded by people who love you enough to tell you when they see you doing it.
But here's the problem is, if you never really realize that that's what you're supposed to be doing anyhow.
Oh, yeah. That becomes extremely difficult.
And that's where a lot of the leaders are. They don't understand their responsibility. Mm-hmm. They don't understand their job as a pastor. Mm-hmm. You know, Jeremy taking that new pastor role, I hope he understands that. You know, I mean, for me, it's easy because Fresh Start's modeled that way. Mm-hmm. You know, we've modeled Fresh Start that way. I was a top pastor, if for lack of a better term, really good at being a pastor before I was ever a pastor. Right. Because that's the model. It's the same model, and being able to take care of that. Even in that, hey, I found myself not pouring into the ones that I need to. And when I see that, I look down. You know, that's the reason why if a guy walks out of this program, the first thing I look at is, what could I have done better? Yeah. You know, I might not have supposed to have done anything with that guy, But what did I do to my 3 to 12 that caused them to do with their 3 to 12 that trickled down to this guy? What could we have done better?
Yeah.
And so we had to be looking at that. And so I agree, like on Wednesday nights, hey, Wednesday nights is youth night, and it's there. I'm there to provide them food.
Yeah.
I'm the pastor of the church, but my only job on Wednesday nights, and it's only because I chose it, is to provide food to them. I serve the leaders and I serve the kids food. And so how am I serving the leaders? I'm serving them because it's one thing they don't have to worry about. They don't have to worry about what we're eating. They don't have to worry about how it gets there, how it's paid for, being hot enough, being what the kids like. They
Yeah.
don't have to worry about any of that because I'm really good at that. And so I'm taking the stress off of them so that they can do what? They can focus on pouring into the kids.
100%.
They don't have to worry about feeding the kids, doing all that. All they have to do is worry about, sowing into the kids. And so that's something I'm able to take off of them. Now, how does that benefit the kids? Because now the leader has a lot less to worry about. They have a lot less stress because that's not their forte. That's not what they're the best at. And now they can strictly focus on what they're good at.
And I would say, to even add another caveat in there, I think that there are some leaders who think that they're doing that. They think that they're serving their 3 to 12 well,
Yeah.
and they're not.
Yeah.
And that's a real thing. It's a very common thing. Here is how you know whether or not you're serving your 3 to 12 well. I'm about to give you a little cheat code hack where you can figure it out. In the last 6 months, how many times have you sat down with them or their families without an agenda? Without an agenda.
Mm-hmm.
Not, hey, something's going on in the worship and this is my worship leader, so I'm going to take him to lunch and we're going to talk about this worship thing. Doesn't count. I'm talking no agenda. You're just spending time with them for the sake of intimacy. That's how you know whether or not you're doing your job well. How many intimate conversations are you having outside of an agenda that you needed to get done? If all of your meetings are because you need something, what ends up happening is people stop wanting to take your calls. Mm-hmm. When my phone rings and I turn the phone over and I see your name, I'm like, oh man,
he needs something.
What is this?
And it's probably last minute.
Yeah, I'm even that way with your daughters. Mm-hmm. Annalise is somebody that I remember there was a time I had to call and we had some conversations a couple times in a row that were not awesome conversations. Not because she did anything wrong. There was a circumstance that had happened that I had to alert her of that wasn't a good circumstance. And that happened 2 times in a row. And I told you, I said, I'm going to call her today just to call her without bad news. I don't want her to start fearing when my name pops up. And I actually called her yesterday.
Amen.
I talked to her yesterday for the same reason. Literally just, hey, and I sent her a message so she knew ahead of time and said, hey, what's your schedule look like today? I'd love to just catch up for a second. And we just talked, just to talk.
Amen.
That's how you maintain intimacy. Annalise and I never see each other anymore.
Right.
So the only way for me to keep that relationship alive and strong is for me to call without an agenda, because there's plenty of things I could ask Annalise for. She's extremely wise in a lot of areas. There's so many different things she could help me with. But yesterday I didn't ask her any of those questions. It ain't because I don't have them.
Right.
I got them. There's a lot of advice I could use.
Right.
There's a lot of questions I can get her to ask Chris.
Right.
He's got a lot of wisdom that I could use. Yesterday wasn't about that.
Amen.
It was about maintaining relationship. We'll get to that later down the road. But it's about maintaining intimacy of relationship and friendships. And so people don't do that anymore.
No.
And they think that, hey, I meet with them all the time. We meet every week. It's like, no, you ask them for things every week. You don't
tell them to do something.
Yeah, you don't love on them. You don't spend time with them just for the sake of spending time with them. And it's different. It's wildly different.
Relationships, communication, those are big in the kingdom of God.
Right. And then the other thing that it does is it allows those people to feel like they can really come and talk to you.
Amen.
Because if every time that we talk so far is just because you have need, and then there's a concern going on in my life, and I know when I bring this to you, it's going to violate the things that you need done. It's like, well, now I'm scared to talk to you because you're not going to react well when I tell you that I need to step down from this role.
Right.
Hey, look, man, there's some stuff going on in my family. I just need to not be the youth pastor for a little while. And now you don't have a youth pastor or somebody to fill all these other, I'm scared to death to tell you that. You don't want that kind of relationship. And so intimacy is different than job relationships.
Right. Keep going. Sorry.
No, I was just saying intimacy is different than job relationships,
Right.
and you can't count any call you made to get something done as you building intimate relationship with a person.
Amen.
It doesn't matter how long you sat down and talked about it. It's not intimate.
Yeah. So if I call somebody on the intercom and they're in first phase or whatever, you're going, I need Joe Smith to come to the office. You're going to hear, ooh, and then when he walks in, he's like, what did I do?
Yeah.
Whereas if I call a third phaser that I have, a relationship with, it's like, hey, Pastor, hey, Clay, what's going on?
Yeah. How quickly would a new guy's perspective change on this whole program, which actually it's hard to say now because you spend so much time with the first phasers, right. But you used to not when the program was structured different. At that time,
right.
If you had a guy who was there for 2 or 3 weeks, so they only really knew you by reputation, and you called him to the office, right, and 100%, right. What'd you do? And he walks in there, hey, shut the door if you don't mind. He shuts the door, have a seat, bud. I just want to know what you think of the place so far. Mm-hmm. Do you realize, I know you realize, but do you realize how that would change his entire perspective of his relationship with you?
I can tell you how
you are as a leader.
I can tell you how that conversation goes. That conversation only lasts 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. Because he is so scared of what's going to come next that it doesn't work the first time. Yeah. And then he leaves and he's like, and he starts getting it through his mind. And then the next day he's coming up to you in the hallway and y'all have a better conversation. Right. But you didn't even have to spend an hour with him. Right. You just let him leave without an agenda. Mm-hmm. You let him leave and walk out the door with, at the conversation with knowing that was the only reason why you had. Yep. And so most of the time, not every time, but most of the time, it isn't a really long conversation because they're waiting for the shoe to drop. Yep. But once they realize that it didn't, sometimes it's 5 minutes later that they come back to say, man, I should have said this a while ago. Right. Or just the next day, y'all have a better relationship. It doesn't take that much. Mm-hmm. No. You don't have to have a whole hour every single time. But it is about, and those things are really cool when they happen.
I send, I'll call it like 3 to 5 text messages to a person pretty regularly. Not a specific person, just assorted people. The Lord will put somebody on my mind. This happened just last night. The Lord put somebody on my mind. Hadn't thought about him in a while. He's a good friend. He's an old friend. We don't live in the same town. But, every time we talk, we have great conversations about the Lord and spirituality and moving forward and continuing to grow in the gospel. I just shot him a message and said, man, how are you doing? How's your walk with the Lord going? He shoots me a message back. He asked me about my kids, make a comment about my kids, and then I ended the conversation by just saying, man, I just wanted to check in on you, let you know that you were on my mind. Yep. And that was it. No agenda. Just I'm maintaining the intimacy of our relationship without being able with someone that I can't contact regularly, that I can't see all the time. But that conversation by itself moves mountains.
I tell you who I enjoy doing that a lot with is other pastors. Mm-hmm. People that aren't used to anybody doing that for them.
Yeah, nobody checks on pastors.
And so I enjoy doing that to other pastors just because nobody else does it, and just because so they'll remind themselves that they have a friend. Right. Because being a pastor can be one of the loneliest things in the world. For me it's different. I'm just built different. I'm built with all the friends and all the people, and I know why. A lot of it's because I listen to people and I invest in people and I listen to their opinions and I value them and they know it. And so I'm a different guy. But most pastors and stuff can feel really lonely a lot of the times, and so I'm the guy that likes to contact them, and even when I wasn't a senior pastor or whatever you want to call it, contact other pastors and just check on them.
It was imposter syndrome.
Is that what it was? Yeah. So we can do that.
It was pastor fatigue and imposter syndrome.
Okay, well let's do that next time. Yeah, I remember it started with pastor fatigue there, and so that kind of leads into that. So
I know that sounded completely random, but he and I were trying to figure something out before the episode, and when he just said about pastors feeling lonely, it just triggered back in my mind that that's
something we want to talk about next time. I know this episode's been a little bit, a little random, but hey, we love to talk about leadership. We love to talk about growth. We love to talk about communication, relationships. Those things mean a lot to us.
So I had a topic for today's episode. I didn't tell you what the topic was. I told you I wasn't going to tell you what it was, but we're coming near to the end of an appropriate amount of time. And so here's what I want to do, because I've already talked about this topic this morning with the second phase class. So I've had a conversation. So I want to, because you don't even know what happened.
Right.
I just want to ask you your opinion. I'm going to tell you what happened. I'm going to ask you your opinion on how you respond to a situation like this, just so that they can hear from somebody besides me about it. So, I was recently uninvited to a church. Yeah. I'm now unwelcome. That was their exact words. I'm no longer welcome at the church. What happened was I preached a very strong identity message in that Jesus has changed us from being a sinful-natured, broken person to a righteous-natured person that now has the ability to choose. Doesn't mean we aren't still capable of doing wrong things, but now we have the choice where before we were slaves to sin, we're no longer slaves to sin. I presented every argument that would be used against it. 1 John, anyone who says he has no sin is a liar, truth's not in him, and the Romans 7 song and dance. I used both of those. I explained them fully in their context, and they just rejected it and rejected me as well. So I explained to them how I respond to a situation like that. But if you were in that exact situation, what is your response? Not necessarily to them, because I haven't said anything to them, and I'm not going to say anything to them. But just as a person, when you encounter that type of opposition, you just preached the gospel for what it was, and you got rejected, and you're told you're no longer welcome. How do you respond?
Yeah. So first off, to the nuts and bolts a little bit, who told you that? Their leadership person?
Their leadership contacted a very close friend of mine. Okay. Because the friend of mine was invited back, and he asked if I was also
no, he's not welcome.
Yes,
okay.
Right.
So for me, I would probably just shoot that person a text and say, look, we appreciate the opportunity that you gave us to speak your congregation, and just want to know that you were praying for your congregation. And here's why I would do that. The reason I would do that is because that is the attitude that I want to move forward with too.
Right.
And so I want to set a precedent by contacting them and just letting them know, just real simple, that hey, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak at your place, and I want you to know that I have a heart for your people, and I'm going to keep praying for your people. And the reason is because then it's kind of like apologizing to your wife real quick. Well, once you apologize to her real quick, then you've thrown away your man card. Well, it's kind of the same way. If I, go ahead and be very courteous and good to them in real life, then when the devil tries to mess with me later and try to cause confusion or issues or whatever, I've already done that. So I'm setting the precedent not to necessarily help them, but to help myself moving forward, because I'm taking the hardest step. The hardest step is to be thankful even when somebody slaps you. The hardest part is to be grateful even when somebody rejects you. So I think that the first step that I would take there is to contact them in that way.
Rip that Band-Aid off.
Just to set a tone for myself that when I go to walk this thing out and the devil tries to hit me with this or hit me with this fiery dart, I've already done the hard part, and that is to be thankful when in rejection. And so I've had similar situations there happen, and that was the best way I know to initiate how we move forward. Right, now, how we move forward is, so here's what's so ironic about this is, you're rejected because of the message that makes it possible for you to move forward.
Right, yeah.
Because it's identity.
Right.
It's knowing who you are. So really, you got an easy one. you got a layup. I mean, you got something. I mean, I've gotten told, something similar to that by something that wasn't true.
Yeah.
You got told that by something that is who you are.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? And so for you, it was kind of like a layup. If you're going to be hit by the devil some way or whatever, I mean, he just gave you a soft jab there because it's where you're the best at.
Right,
I mean, if you got abs of steel and he hits you right in the abs, so you setting the precedent there for, hey, this is how I handled it gracefully. Now I'm going to move forward. And as I move forward, the devil's trying to come at me. The cool thing is what you use is that identity message.
Right.
You use what you're getting rejected because your identity is so strong. And you know that message and those things to be so factual, not just biblically, but in your life.
Right.
And because you know it, it makes it so much easier.
Yeah. I agree with that 100%. I will tell you this. I just want to share this. We don't have to really get into it so much, but I do want to tell you there was one part that disappointed me, and it wasn't on being asked not to come back. Mm-hmm. The part that disappointed me was this: that this is a group of men who would claim Christ, mm-hmm. but if they see me in a place where they think I'm walking in error, it is disappointing that none of them wanted to sit down and try to talk to me, correct me, teach me. These would be older men in the community that I look up to. Mm-hmm. And that part is disappointing. And I want to encourage anybody who's listening that if you see a young person who you think is doctrinally not sound and needs help, don't just write them off and let them continue to run the wrong direction. There are all kinds of young people who have all kinds of crazy beliefs. Like, we need to arm them up and try to teach them and correct them and show them the truth of the gospel and the strength of their identity and those things. We don't need to just say, oh, well, they got these crazy, let them go. And so that part was disappointing. I'm not upset with them in any way, but just as kind of the whole of how we as Christians tend to move forward in those situations. Man, I would have loved to, even if it still resulted the same way. Right. I would have just loved for somebody to try to sit me down and show me in the Word where their disagreement is coming from. Because as someone who believes in Jesus, I need to have the humility to listen and give opportunity to anyone who wants to show me anything in the Word. And so we could have had an excellent conversation. Would it have changed the outcome? I don't know whether or not it would have or not, but I can tell you that if you can ever show me evidence within Scripture, I mean, David John changed my entire belief system because he pulled a Bible out of his pocket and started reading Scripture to me. He didn't tell me his opinion. He disagreed with what I said. He opened up the Bible and he started reading. And I was forced to confront it, and I haven't changed any since then. If you can show me within the Word where the context of what you believe is correct over the context of what I'm teaching, dude, I will change so fast it'll make your head spin.
Well, let's take it one more step further, and I know we need to close, but you can take it one more step further. You said that if somebody disagrees with, you doctrinally or whatever, that you would rather them come to you instead of just reject you and stuff. Especially as a young Christian walking this thing out. But the other side of that is what about the young Christian that's making some mistakes? Maybe morally, that doesn't really realize it, or maybe they're not walking as holy as they should and stuff. Most Christian leaders would just say, well, they're not living the life that they should and won't have anything to do with them. Or they just say, well, just let them do their thing. What they really should do is to go to them and say, hey, look, you're doing really good in a lot of spots. I've been watching you. You're doing really good. A lot of things are happening. But I do see this and this that we could tighten up on a little bit, and it would really benefit in some areas. I saw a young man on Facebook earlier this week that, basically out on Facebook and says, hey, I've been concentrating a little harder in these areas right here. And really I've found out now I really shouldn't be concentrating in these areas so much. I need to concentrate more in this area. Well, I love it.
Yeah.
Now I hope that God himself did not have to tell him that.
Yeah.
I hope that a leader, a friend, a brother came to him and said, hey, look, I understand what you're trying to do here, and I understand this, but it probably would be better if we took some of those efforts and put it over here. That's what I hope happened.
Yeah.
Because the result is the same. He's headed a better direction today, okay? But I hope that it was a good brother, leader, pastor, friend that kind of helped guide that, because that helped that guy too.
100%.
You know, and then it shows this guy, not only do I need to do this better, but I need to be a leader that helps my 3 to 12 and steer them that direction. So I think that it's not just, and this is where it kind of gets messy, and you have to have good relationships. I hope that it's not just doctrinally where we can help, correct, steer, and all that, but it can also just be the way that we live.
Sure.
You know, the value system, the morals, the holiness that we walk by, you know, those are scary words, you know, or whatever, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. I think the truest form of love is being willing to have difficult conversations.
Amen.
You know? And so if you got people in your life you need to have hard conversations with, take a deep breath and love them enough to have the hard talk.
And realize it's not all about right and wrong.
Right.
It's about just tweaking some areas, getting a little better in some areas, a little different focus in areas. It doesn't mean that they're wrong and you're right. It doesn't mean that.
Yeah.
It just means that there's a little better path.
Yeah. And sometimes you might just need some light shed on the situation. They may be coming from somewhere genuine, and I just don't really have context for what they're saying. So after we talk, they may say, well, hey, this is going on. That's why I'm saying this. And I'm like, oh, that makes total sense within that context, you know. Just from what I was seeing, it seemed crazy, you know. And so there's no telling. But if you never have that conversation, you never
If you just shut them down and say, hey, he can't come to our church anymore.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
love y'all.